Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the third episode of Perspectives, third-party talk show with Bil Redpath of the Libertarian Party, and I'm David Rych of the Green Party. We got the show going so that you can understand where the third-party positions are coming from, people are coming from, and whatnot. And again, real quick, and this I think I'm going to be the last time I say this. I hate redundancy. Whatever I say does not necessarily represent the Green Party. That's it. That's all I'm saying. From now on, you're just going to have to assume that. Okay, so we're going to talk about some stuff today. We're going to talk about the Ukraine war. We're going to talk about ballot access, which is your kind of golden ticket here. Important to me as well. Very important to third parties because this is where I think it all boils down to personally. Yeah. And I think that can be described. And I think we're also going to talk about just the candidates that like the Democrat candidates for president and Republican candidates thus far, and why we think they're wholly inadequate and why you should vote third party. Okay, so why don't we kick it off? You want to kick it off with the Ukraine war? Get the nasty stuff out of the way. I also want to say as a disclaimer and as a moral statement that in no very few ways, shapes, and forms do I condone any kind of war. War is terrible. It is awful. We have a legacy in this country of involving ourselves in endless wars, as they call it, and it's appropriate title. I just found out that my nephew joined the army, and I'm like, are you out of your mind? I mean, do you see what's going on in this?
They're having trouble. They're having trouble meeting their quotas. I've read that.
Well, I think that's okay. Albert Einstein said something like, the only way we're going to stop war is to get the youth to not join the military. I'm like, okay, that's true. I mean, all around the globe, that's probably true. I mean, just if everybody stopped joining the military, how could there be wars? But anyway, what spoils that beautiful sentiment is that one country doesn't have that, then they just start attacking everybody else. So, then you're screwed. There are practical reasons to have a military. I get that. But ours is a bit overblown. Anyway, you wanted to kick off the Ukraine thing because it's a very historically rooted situation. It's not as clear cut, I think, as people think it is. Everybody's like, yeah, Ukraine. There are issues with what's going on. I will say this real quick. Putin sees Ukraine as America saw Cuba back in 1963. I'll just say that. Now go ahead.
Well, that may be so. He has over many years, Putin spoke about how important Ukraine was. Right. And I think that needed to be taken into much more serious consideration by U.S. policymakers, NATO policymakers. The United States said after the end of the Soviet Union, we're not going to expand NATO to the east, but NATO has been expanded to the east. We were involved in overturning a democratically elected president who was apparently pro-Russia. I'm not a Ukraine expert. This is sort of what I've put together here. But in any event, but we were involved in the change of a regime change in Ukraine back in 2014. Why we were involved in that, I really don't know. Ukraine, certainly, look, a lot of people, when they speak out about the Ukraine war, and they don't take the standard U.S. narrative, Ukraine good, Russia bad. So many people then say, "Oh, you're a stooge for Putin, or you're an isolationist." I truly despise that term, non-interventionist. Yes, okay. But it's amazing that they accuse libertarians who are in favor of free trade as being not isolationists, which is not true. It's just a smear term. But Ukraine, in terms of I think at the World Transparency Index, something like that, Ukraine, or Corruption Index, Ukraine was rated just a little bit better than Russia before all this, just a little bit better. So, in that regard, they're not that much different. Although this was absolutely, totally uncalled for by Putin. As far as I'm concerned, Putin is a war criminal.
Yes.
I know that he is very carefully considering where he travels in the world, because
he won't go to South Africa because he'll get arrested.
Right. He's afraid that he will be arrested if he goes to South Africa. So he would, if he came to the United States, he would certainly be arrested. So he ain't doing that anytime soon. But the thing is this, is that, and I will have to thank David Stockman. He writes some interesting essays, and I subscribe to his. I want to say it's a guilty pleasure, except I don't know why I'd be feeling guilty. But he really he is completely against United States intervention in support of Ukraine, and basically says that it's time for partitioning there, and he actually analyzes I don't know if they're called regions or provinces or whatever. I think they're regions, and analyzes the presidential vote total from before the last presidential election. I think it was in 2014. It was the presidential election before 2014 or 2015. And he analyzes the results, and it turns out that the eastern regions of Ukraine were very pro-Russian president,
Yes.
and the western regions were very much anti-Russian president.
Right.
Now, don't ask me to rattle off their names.
No, but I mean that I've heard that as well many times.
Yeah, and he puts it in a color-coded map and says there ought to be partitioning. I mean, they ought to let if the eastern part of Ukraine wants to be a part of Russia, let them be a part of Russia. And it just seems to me that, and I mean, it's not a minor difference. I mean, there's a huge difference between the political sentiment in Western Ukraine versus Eastern Ukraine.
Yes.
So it just seems to me this is all just a terrible tragedy. And it seems to me that through more foreign policy restraint, living up to the promise that we weren't going to expand NATO eastward, the U.S. not getting involved in 2014, 2015 in Ukraine, it just seems that this could have been avoidable. And I even read a column to that effect. I went back. I happened to come across a Steve Chapman column in the Chicago Tribune from, I believe, January 2022, saying that really this should be settled. This before the war, written several weeks before the war, really this all should be settled with Putin, so there isn't a war. Well, unfortunately, there was a war, and it's still going on, and there's no off ramp. It doesn't look to me that there's any realistic chance for a ceasefire anytime in the foreseeable future. So it's a mess, and unfortunately, it's going to take the diplomacy of nations other than the United States probably to bring about ceasefire.
Yes, I don't think Russia would be interested in listening to anybody from this country. What do you think is Putin's ultimate goal? Like when would if Putin gets what he wants, whatever that is, and he says, okay, we're done, we got what we wanted. What is it that he wants?
I think his ultimate goal was probably to install a pro-Russian regime in Kyiv. That's my understanding. You hear Kiev, but I once read where it rhymes with Steve.
No, I've heard. But I grew up, eating chicken Kiev.
Oh,
but I mean, now I hear it's called Kyiv. I don't know.
I read where it rhymes with Steve is what I read. So,
okay.
Okay,
fine.
I don't know. I haven't been there, and I'm not going soon.
Okay. Yeah. No.
Yeah, and there's other things too. Like it's just another testament to like kind of like the mainstream media and stuff like that, where like you're not even allowed to like state like facts and truths about certain given situations. There is like one of the things that Putin and his higher ups were saying about the invasion was the concern with like Nazi presence, neo-Nazi presence in the military there. And everybody in the mainstream media downplays that. There is a neo-Nazi presence in the Ukrainian army. It's called the Azov regime or brigade, whatever. It's very true. It's very real. You can look it up, AZOV, Azov. And it has it's been around for decades. Local towns have hired them to police streets and so on. And there is now whether or not it's big enough and influential enough in the Ukrainian army to influence policy and strategic reasoning, I don't know, but it is present. It is there, and the Russians have a very sensitive, rightly so, notion of Nazis because they tried to kill them all back in World War II. But it's a very real thing. And again, I don't know about if it's weighty enough to have like any sort of like, substantial or relevant influence, but it does exist. It's so don't, we can't stop pretending like it doesn't. Like, oh, it's false. No, it's not false. Have you heard this?
I've heard, yes, I'm aware of this. This has been brought up in essays that I've read, written by David Stockman. So there is something to it. The extent of the existence of that, I really don't know.
Right, I don't either. We have white supremacists in our military, here in America. I mean, is it enough to like make our military white supremacist? No. But I mean, it's still, they shouldn't be there. So, individually, they might make decisions, as representatives of the United States military. That might not be great. Hold on, we got a comment over here. I heard Kyiv is Ukrainian and Kiev is Russian. Okay.
Okay.
Fair enough. Thank you, Terry. That's my Aunt Terry. Okay, cool. Like you're right. I mean, it's a disturbing situation. I don't understand like what like if he doesn't get his whatever sort of presence in Kiev or Kiev that he wants, is just going to keep going until he does. He's just going to keep blowing up villages and cities until he does. And when he does, what does that mean? I mean, isn't Kiev in the middle of the Ukraine? I mean, it's like how half of Berlin was Soviet owned, but like the rest of it was like not.
It's pretty far over.
Yeah,
I think.
It's landlocked, if you will.
Yeah.
But I mean, the notion that Ukraine again, is on the border of Russia. The people in that area of Ukraine are very pro-Russian. I think that would solve a lot of things, Bill, like what you said. Like, look, like why not just like with Taiwan, with Ukraine, like all these different places, do a referendum vote. Do you want it to be a part of China? Well, 80% of the Chinese said no. Well, then China, too bad. Okay, stop. I mean, the whole notion. I know that they're not going to do
that easy.
As do I, and that's why I'm saying it, because like it's just this whole thing again of like top-down authority. Like this very small handful of people are determining the future of billions of other people. It's ludicrous, So, but okay, but again, that's my ideological reasoning, and it's not going to happen. But I'll never stop hoping for it. Yeah. So, okay. And the threat. Okay. Well, let me ask you specifically about this. I mean, sending over like, F-15s and these munition bombs and stuff like that. Munition bombs are awful. They're all awful. People are afraid that we're escalating it to a point of like, converging on World War III. Do you find that legitimate or no?
Well, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, I think that is unlikely, but I mean, that's not very reassuring, that statement. I read, an essay where somebody said, if the United States is going to send cluster munitions over to Ukraine, it signals that the United States really doesn't care what sort of condition the country is in at the end of this war. And those things are going to be a real problem for decades to come there. And there's this pattern with the Biden White House where there's this escalation in terms of the lethality of weapons, and at first they say no, and then they think about it or are lobbied by others, including the military suppliers of this nation that are looking to sell their wares, and it seems like there's this pattern of that first the Biden White House says no, and then they say yes. Ultimately, they relent. But I mean, sending jet fighters over there, oh gosh, it's you just never
massive escalation.
That is absolutely. And they were talking about earlier on they were saying no, we can't enforce a no-fly zone. Way back in the day, I think early in this conflict, and that is really as you said, a massive escalation, and the problem is you just don't know where all this is ultimately going to go.
Yeah, no, it's a scary uncertainty is the issue. Like, I mean, Probably not nuclear war, but I mean, it could end up being another world war just on the ground, or maybe not nukes involved, but and another proxy war is not okay either. I mean, well, no war is okay, I'm thinking back to like pre soldiers on the ground in Vietnam, how like since like the late 50s, early 60s, we had lots of like military consultants over there, like tens of thousands. And then that just kept escalating and escalating. And then we probably put a couple like troops here, a couple troops there, and here's a little ammunition for you, you good, the South and not for the North. And then all of a sudden there's, 58,000 American soldiers dead. And who knows how many millions of, Vietnamese people died. It's just that it's a legitimate concern that these are steps of escalation. This is what escalation looks like.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, you just don't know where it's going to go.
Right. No, it's true. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anyway, on to a less macabre note. Let's talk about ballot access.
Okay.
This is your thing here. This is what you do. All right. Go. So take the reins. Go ahead.
Well, what would you like? I would like to say one thing. First of all, I'd like to define ballot access.
Okay.
Because the usage is getting polluted these days. Frankly, because by people, I think they don't mean badly, but I have run across situations here recently where ballot access is being used to describe the ability of voters to cast votes. That's not ballot access. That's voters' rights or voting rights, right? Ballot access has to do with the ability of candidates to get on the ballot.
Right.
And I see a lot of, and I guess, I'm not like the final word. I suppose I'm not the final word on this, but really they are two different issues. Yes. They deserved, and they're both important, and they deserve to be called different things.
And perhaps maybe they're conflating it because of the indirect connection. Like I can't vote for a candidate if they're not on the ballot. Maybe that's what they're kind of mixing up in their head.
But in any event, ballot access is a issue here in the United States for minor parties. The Libertarian Party, fortunately, has had the best ballot access of all the minor parties. I mean, the Green Party deserves ballot access.
Constitution Party, People's Party.
Exactly. And working families. Now you've got No Labels. Now they're knocking out a lot of ballot drives. They're on at least 6 states right now because they have a lot of money. What
are they called? No Labels Party?
No Labels Party, right. This is the organization that the Democratic Party is very scared of right now, and the Green Party with Cornel West seeking the nomination. But the No Labels is threatening to nominate a unity ticket. I guess one Republican, one Democrat. And Joe Manchin from West Virginia, the U.S. Senator from West Virginia, has been. He actually went up to a No Labels event in New Hampshire. People have been talking about him possibly being the No Labels presidential candidate, and they're saying that they may not run a presidential ticket. If so, they've spent a lot of money on for nothing. But this has happened in the past. Americans Elect, as a matter of fact, a few years ago, there was this organization called Americans Elect, and Americans Elect spent a lot of money to run to be able to run a presidential ticket, and ultimately decided not to do it. And I'm not sure what the criteria, subjective. What the subjective? It's going to be a subjective call as to whether they're going to run a presidential ticket. But I'll tell you one thing: they have the financial wherewithal to probably get the presidential ticket on the ballot in all 50 states and D.C. And then there's the Forward Party, Andrew Yang's Forward Party. There's that. So anyway, there's a lot going on out there in terms of ballot access right now.
That's interesting. Okay, so the No Labels Party is not the same as the People's Party, right?
Correct. It is not the same thing. The People's Party. I never heard of them. The People's, but they've been in the news.
The People's Party is the one that Cornel West decided not to align with to go to the Green Party.
Right. That's right. Okay. And so anyway, but I think the People's Party is only on the ballot in Florida. That's it.
That was his final
deciding factor.
And the Green Party already has, I think it's 16 states right now where the Green Party is qualified, and the Green Party will probably get on the presidential ticket in 35, maybe I think it was ballpark 35 states where the Green Party presidential ticket was on in 2020.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot more. I mean, he'll be on enough states. Howie Hawkins was on enough states ballots where he theoretically could have won the Electoral College. And the LP presidential ticket was on the ballot in all 50 states plus DC. And those and plus R plus D, those were the only candidates in 2020 who could theoretically win the Electoral College.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that, and Cornel West is, and I've been watching him, and he's bring. What's great about like people like Cornel West and like Spike Cohen even is that they're bringing more awareness to the parties, a positive awareness. People, first of all, I know people love Spike. He's just a very likable, a very intelligent, very well-spoken person.
Exactly. He is a great orator, no doubt.
Yeah, very true. Cornel West is he has a PhD in philosophy. I have a philosophy degree, so I already like him there. But he's definitely got an interesting demeanor, calling everybody brother and sister. I mean, that's, endearing to a certain extent. But we'll see. I don't think as far as I understand, he's not actually officially a candidate, because that was one of the things, like, everybody thinks he is our candidate, and he's not. He still has to go through the internal machinations of the Green Party primary and stuff like that.
So. Right. But I would say that right now, he's the odds-on favorite to get the nomination.
Oh, 100%. Oh, yeah. If he's not, then there's something wrong. Yeah, for sure. And he's just very high profile before now, which is really good for our party as well, is that he just kind of brings that, again, ups the awareness, which is good. And if it doesn't happen this time, he's a known name. And a lot of people, especially on the left, really, really like him. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting time for sure. But like you said, I want to see all these parties get in a chance. So let's the segues right into like why ballot access is so difficult for us. Why?
The laws. I mean, it's really that simple.
Right.
I mean, take Illinois. All right. You live in Illinois. I live in Illinois.
Right, true.
And the ballot access laws in Illinois are among the most difficult in the United States. Among the states. It is a fact that for U.S. House of Representatives, Illinois has the second worst petitioning requirement in the nation. The only other is Georgia, because Georgia wants people to get 5% of the number of registered voters. Literally, to get on the ballot for U.S. House in Georgia, you have to go get the signature of 1 out of every 20 registered voters in your congressional district.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, nobody has done that in Georgia. I forgot. Richard Winger would be ashamed. I forget the year, but in Illinois, we're talking decades. Okay, decades since you've had a non-R, non-D, except in special elections. I believe there have been certain special elections where the laws are different, and also one other thing in Georgia. I mean, statewide, we have statewide ballot access in Georgia for statewide candidates, but not down ticket. All right. And so anyway, in Illinois, it's 5% of the total vote for that election in the last general election.
Right.
So in Illinois, for 2024, on average, it's going to take 12,000 signatures of registered voters. It's going to vary district by district, and in some it's less, but I don't think it goes down below 6,000 signatures. And which is a hell of a lot, but on average 12,000. When I lived in Virginia, it was 1,000, still is 1,000 valid signatures of registered voters in the congressional district to get on the ballot for U.S. House of Representatives.
For any party.
For any party, any independent, any party, 1,000 SIGs. All right, and I was trying to think. So basically 12,000 here in Illinois. The Republicans and Democrats, by my calculation, on average, it's 250 signatures to get on the ballot for primary, for U.S. House of Representatives primary, where it's 0.5% of the total number of votes in that party's primary last election. So we're talking substantially smaller numbers. But for independents and third parties, 25,000 signatures get statewide slate on the ballot. Then down ticket, all U.S. House, everybody in there, they aren't a part of that statewide petition. They have to do their own petition in their own congressional district, and ditto for state Senate and ditto for state House. It's separate candidate petitions for each district. And on average, let me think of, I think the number is like 1,600 signatures to get on the ballot on average next year for state House. It's about 3,000 on average for state Senate. So it's like 1,600 signatures for state House. In Virginia, it's 125 sigs.
Why do you think Virginia is so
reasonable? Well, we actually lobbied. It used to be worse in Virginia but I was about, when did that law change? Back about 20 years ago. I'm thinking 20 to 25 years ago. We lobbied and got the law changed in Virginia, and right. It has really helped the Libertarian Party and other parties get on the ballot there. Mind you, it's still too hard in my opinion, but it's a lot better than Illinois. So these are barriers that have been erected by incumbent politicians to keep challengers off the ballot. And it's also used in Illinois, the laws. I mean, it's a lot of signatures actually to get on the ballot. It's fewer signatures, but there's a lot of signatures to get on the ballot for state House and state Senate. It's like 500 signatures to get on a primary ballot for state House, 1,000 for state Senate. And this is used by incumbent politicians to keep intra-party challengers off the ballot in Illinois. I mean, it really is. It's a political sport in Illinois to try to kick people off the ballot, and even intra-party. And it ought to change. How should it change? In my opinion, this is not my idea. It's from the Harvard Journal of Legislation. It had an article from 24 years ago, 1999, but it still applies today. And that is basically a 0.1% petitioning requirement. That is a political party should be able to get statewide ballot status for all partisan elections if they have a petition which is in which they gather 0.1% of the number of registered voters in that state. So in Illinois, we're talking about 9,000 signatures. Wisconsin and Missouri allow new political parties to get on the ballot for all partisan offices in the state, 10,000 valid signatures. That's it. But here in Illinois, it would be about 50 times that, or I think it would be about 450 to 500,000 signatures to accomplish in Illinois what is about 10,000 signatures. Would take 10,000 signatures in Wisconsin or Missouri. And
these are for statewide elections.
I'm adding up, mind you, in Illinois to get U.S. House, State House, and State Senate on the ballot. I'm adding those petitions in, but you just have one petition, a party petition in Wisconsin or Missouri, 10,000 sigs, everybody's on.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Well, yeah, that 1999, but it's still applicable.
Sure. It is a 0.1% petitioning requirement. And now we don't have, I think Illinois is one of 11 states, I think, that does not have registration by party. Virginia was the same way. There's no chance to register in a party. But if that were the case, the guideline in this article suggested guideline was 0.05%, basically 1/20th of 1%. 1/20th of 1%. If you had registrations of 1/20th of 1% of the number of registered voters in the state, you should be able to qualify that way as a political party.
Interesting. Okay.
And Delaware does that. Delaware has that standard, exactly that standard, where if a political party has 1/20th of 1% of the number of registered voters in the state, that party has ballot status in Delaware.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. And this is, to the viewers, I want to make mention because, and I've said this to Bill before, I've gotten into kind of heated arguments with, supposed friends of mine over third party parties running for any sort of office. Because the duopoly thinks that, the Democrats on the Green Party side, the Republicans on the Libertarian side, think that we're stealing elections from them, or somehow we're sabotaging the elections by offering up candidates of our own when they do get on the ballot. Especially the presidential one, the left or the Democrats are freaking out because of Cornel West and whomever else even like Marianne Williams and RFK Jr.
Well, if it's that big of a problem, then institute ranked choice voting.
Thank you. So
I mean,
that's good. Thank you. So ballot access
if it's that big of a
means
deal,
very little without ranked choice voting, or I should say vice versa. Why don't you go ahead and talk about that?
well, on this point right here. I mean, first of all, my philosophy, more than the philosophy, it's the honest truth. People's votes belong to themselves. All right. I mean, when somebody casts a vote, it's their vote, and they can vote any way they like. And the Democratic and Republican politicians are free to make the strategic vote argument. You know, whatever they want to say. I don't think people are wasting their vote at all when they vote for an independent or minor party candidate. But if they want to go ahead and say that, fine. All right. That you don't waste your vote. This is too important. And you're going to hear that argument with Biden and Trump. I mean, if they're the two major party nominees in 2024, there's going to be a lot of that argumentation coming forth, especially from the Democratic Party. This is too big of an election to throw your vote away. But, you know, it's interesting. But they can't prove this. I mean, to this day, there are people who are still hot about 2000 and Ralph Nader.
Right.
To this day, I mean, it's believe me, I hear privately that there are still people who are angry with Ralph Nader, and they can't prove that Nader. First of all, even if there was a spoiler effect, Nader didn't steal it in any real sense of the word steal.
Right.
But it really can't be proven. It's an assertion. It's really a political argument. Oh, Ralph Nader stole the election. But there was a research that in 1950 or 51, and I don't recall, it was a recent post by Richard Winger on ballot-access.org. People are rolling out these spoiler arguments again. But there was a political scientist who did research on the 1948 presidential campaign, and said that based on his analysis of the data, and I don't know the argument, I'm just saying what the conclusion was. Based on his analysis of the data, the presence of Henry Wallace running for president on the progressive, I believe it was Progressive Party ticket in 1948, helped Harry Truman win the presidency in 1948. It didn't hurt Harry Truman. And so people who make this argument that of the spoiler effects of like somewhat like-minded candidates, candidates on the left, both on the left or both on the right, so to speak, should investigate that claim that it was made that Wallace actually helped Truman get elected in 1948. So, but at the end of the day, if it's again, the votes belong to the voters, not to the politicians, not to the parties. But if it's really that big a stinking deal, then institute ranked choice voting.
Which
problem solved.
Right. So for people that don't understand ranked choice voting, could you give us a basic summary?
Well, I'm speaking in this case of single winner ranked choice voting. At one time, it was referred to as IRV, instant runoff voting, but the vernacular has changed. Now it's called ranked choice voting. Okay. And there is a form of ranked choice voting for multi-winner races. And sometimes that has historically been called single transferable vote. Okay. I won't go into that right now, but the single winner race, it's easy to describe. I mean, people get a ballot and they rank their candidates. Instead of just marking, an X next or voting for one candidate, they rank their candidates. This candidate is my first choice. This is my second choice. This candidate's my third choice. As many or as few as they like. Okay. Now, there are some elections where they're limited in the number, but generally it's they don't have to rank them all. They rank whoever they want. And then, it's assumed that they're indifferent among the other candidates if they don't rank them. They look at the results after all the votes have been cast. If a candidate has a majority of first choice votes, they win. Okay. They have a majority of first choice votes. If they don't, they eliminate candidates from the bottom up looking at the number of votes they have, and then they transfer one at a time. They take the candidates out and they transfer each voter's vote to their next choice candidate. And this continues until somebody has a majority of votes, right? And then that person is declared the winner. So somebody who got maybe second place or even third place on the first choice votes can win, because there are a lot of may be very intensely popular with a minority, but everybody else doesn't like the candidate. All right. And so now usually the person with the most first choice votes wins, but that's not always the case. Sometimes somebody comes from behind once votes are candidates are eliminated and votes transferred.
All right, yeah, very, very cool. Yeah, no, it's so like, just so everybody knows, like, if you saw the clips of Sarah Palin like throwing her phone in a back hallway because she lost the race, she blamed it on ranked choice voting.
I didn't
Sarah
see
Palin
that.
lost because she's a crappy candidate, not
Right.
because of ranked choice voting. But
right, the thing is this is that now this has been made a lightning rod issue by a lot of Republicans, because first of all, they claim that it's too difficult to understand. Well, that's a lot of bunk. There are surveys done, there's research. People understand it. People like it. Where it's used, it's popular, right? And it is content neutral. Now a lot of them paint, this is a voting system of the left, and the left favors it, and it helps them. And that is not the case. It is content neutral. But you have states now that have banned ranked choice voting. Florida, Tennessee. Oh yeah, there are more. I'm pretty sure there are more, but I can't name them beyond Florida and Tennessee that have said no ranked choice voting allowed in this state. Period.
that's
right?
crazy.
Yeah, it is. And so no voting system is perfect. There are technical problems with any voting system in terms of the mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
So no voting system is perfect, but ranked choice voting is used in other nations. It's called, generally historically it's been called the alternative vote, but it's used in other nations. It's used to elect the mayor of London. It's been used in Australia. It is not difficult to understand.
Isn't it actually the case in some?
Pardon?
Isn't it actually now been established in some states? Doesn't Maine have ranked choice voting?
Yes, it has been. Maine has, and Alaska has. But here's the thing. So a lot of Republicans are really down on ranked choice voting, except that there are some exceptions. It has been used in internal party elections in Utah by the Republican Party. It is being used in internal primaries in Virginia. Virginia has these private, they call them firehouse primaries, where it's not run by the state, it's run by the political party. And they called them firehouse primaries because they were usually held on Saturdays and at firehouses. Instead of all the polling places being open, maybe in Fairfax County, they have, 4 or 5 locations. People have to drive to these locations. So they're essentially private primaries that allow really any set of rules to be set, because it's not a public primary. They don't have to follow the law in Virginia. The party can set the rules. And both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in Virginia have used ranked choice voting in primaries there, in these private primaries. And they used ranked choice voting, by the way, in the 2021 governor nominating convention in the Republican Party, and they nominated Glenn Youngkin as their nominee, who defeated Terry McAuliffe in the general election. So it actually helped the Republican Party select a candidate who was mainstream enough to actually win the general election in 2021. So the Virginia GOP likes it, the Utah GOP likes it, and where was it? Oh, in Oregon recently. Now, this is a big development, by the way, in Oregon. Back, it was in late June, it was about a month ago, the state legislature passed a bill. The governor didn't have to sign it. Both houses of the state legislature passed a bill to allow ranked choice voting for president, U.S. House, U.S. Senate, and the 4 statewide offices, governor, attorney general, a couple of others. And it's going to the vote of the people on Election Day 2024. The people of Oregon will be voting as whether they want to use ranked choice voting to elect those offices and be used for president. If it passes, it would become effective on January 1, 2028. So you could have a ranked choice voting presidential general election in Oregon in 2028. And I bet it will pass. I bet it will pass.
Oregon, yeah, absolutely.
I bet it will happen.
Yeah, that's it. I lived in Portland for like 15 or 12 years. Portlanders are very politically savvy and very smart. So good for them. I mean, Portlanders, not all of Oregon.
But that's the first time that ranked choice voting has been passed through a legislature like that. Like I said, the people of Oregon still have to vote on it, but otherwise, all the ranked choice voting initiatives that have passed have happened through initiatives.
Interesting. Okay, very cool. Wow, very, very cool. And I just want to say real quick before we segue to the next topic, is that, you hear a lot of people, I listen to like progressive radio a lot, CPT, Chicago Progressive Talk, 8:20 a.m. And the Tom Hartman, it was Stephanie Miller is on first, and then Tom Hartman Monday through Friday. And I very much enjoy listening to their shows. Stephanie Miller's hysterical. Tom Hartman is nobody to be trifled with. He's extremely intelligent. But they are just constantly wailing on like the Green Party specifically, because they're left. And they're just not having it. And what you hear is like what you said. It's just scapegoating. They say that like we steal elections, which is just like semantically false. It doesn't even make any sense. Or we take elections from them. To take something, you have to did they vote for your guy in the first place, then take it back? No. Okay, voting for somebody else is not taking anything from anybody. And the thing that bothers me the most, and you said this, voting belongs to the individual. Another way of saying that is like the opposite of voting strategically is voting your conscience.
Right.
Which is the best, I think. I mean, I think that is strategy. If you think it's the right way to do it, that is kind of your conscience speaking. So it's sort of like this logical fallback that even if you think that strategic voting is the right thing to do, that's your conscience speaking, because your conscience tells you what value is, the right thing and the wrong thing. But okay, that's just far. The thing is that I'm not going to vote Tom Hartman's conscience. I'm voting my conscience.
Right.
I don't vote for your candidate because I don't like your candidate. Okay, that's it. If you want to put up a better candidate, then be my guest, and maybe I'll consider it. But I mean, it's absolute absurdity. I think of it because when they say, "Well, you have no chance of winning," well, I'm like, "Well, that's mathematically false. Of course, we have a chance of winning. You have a low likelihood of winning. That's true. I mean, the probability just by precedent is it's less likely, but it certainly isn't impossible. But what is impossible to win is to not run at all.
Right.
And we are trying. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was going to say that. I mean, that perspective just drives me up the wall, because it assumes that the only purpose of an election is to select a leader. There's more to an election than that, or there should be. It shouldn't be just about the horse race. There are public policy positions that need to be stated and debated, and it's not very satisfying watching a Republican and Democrat go at it most of the time. It's just about, talking points and name calling, and too much of the time, not always, but way too much of the time. And yes. The Libertarian Party faces the same thing, particularly on after the Georgia general election, November 2022, where there was not a majority won by either Warnock or Walker, Herschel Walker, and
that guy.
And so they had to go to a runoff. Well, first of all, they could have used ranked choice. They could have made it a plurality election, which I do not recommend, but they could have. I think these runoffs have tended to be sort of a Southern thing, actually, over the years. I think there's a history of runoff elections in the South, but or they could use ranked choice voting, and they wouldn't have had to have a second election. But after it became clear, after it was decided, we got to have a runoff in December, on MSNBC, they were all up in arms about the Libertarian Party. Oh, that Libertarian Party. They did it. Yeah, a lot of... They did it. It's their fault. What do they think they're doing? And I mean, do they really think there's a First Amendment in this nation? I mean, the scapegoating out there is absolutely, people don't like just two choices. First of all, they don't. And we're really in a situation in this nation where the average voter, I think it's true that a majority of voters go in to vote against someone. They go to vote against a candidate in this nation. To me, it's clear. I mean, and you see it in the literature. You see, before election day, stuff shows up in the mail. A lot of stuff shows up in the mail, as we all know. But so much of it doesn't even name somebody to vote for. It's vote against so-and-so.
Right.
Vote against this candidate. And you have to put on there who sent it out. Well, it's usually the opposing political party, but the messaging is all about vote against this person, vote against that person. Not really, doesn't say a hell of a lot for our election system. I'll say that.
No, it's pretty pathetic, caricature of our current political system. And another thing too that's frustrating is I hear Tom Hartman actually specifically advocate third parties a lot. He thinks it's a great idea. It's very pro-democracy.
Until it really counts.
Until
it really counts.
Until it's against his person. But he's like, but you need a parliamentary system for that. I'm like, why? Why do you need a parliamentary system? That's ridiculous. Again, if you let us on the ballot, I guarantee you, I know plenty of people that would love to vote third party if they thought individually that we had a greater chance. I guarantee it. Which is another frustrating part, and we've talked about this before, is that it is a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, is that this person's not voting third party because they don't think enough other people will, but each one of those other people are doing it for the same reason.
Yeah, well, I think that you wouldn't need a parliamentary system, but I do think that to get beyond just R's and D's winning elections, you'd have to have some sort of proportional representation in the legislature.
Isn't that what House of Representatives is?
No, the U.S. House of Representatives?
Yeah, isn't there maybe it's...
No, it's single, we're talking multi-member districts, basically.
Okay.
I mean, there are different ways that you could structure proportional representation, but there have been bills put in to use the ranked choice voting method in a multi-winner race to elect the U.S. House of Representatives where it could be used. I mean, in states like North Dakota and Wyoming, it couldn't be used for U.S. House because they only have one member of the U.S. House from the states with very tiny population.
Okay, I see
but in Illinois, we've got 17 right now, so you could split it maybe into 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 5. So you maybe have 4 districts, maybe. With that and elect multiple candidates from each district.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I see.
Yeah.
I was thinking just because it represents a population instead of the Senate being 2 for every state. I think that's why I got confused for proportion. But no, that makes a lot of sense. Real quick from Heartland Newsfeed. We got a newsfeed watching us. If it's the fault of anyone, Georgia 2022. It's the political duopoly for running crappy candidates. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. Herschel Walker. Come on. I love Herschel Walker as a football player. Do not get me wrong. But come on. I mean, I'm so when it went to a runoff, I'm like, you got to be kidding me. No.
Probably better. He's probably better than Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Well, I would rank him in with that group. But if there's a hierarchy within that set, he probably ranks first. I agree. She is unbelievable. Anyway, so speaking of idiotic politicians at the federal level, let's talk about a little ad hominem there. Let's talk about the current political candidates saying they're running for president in the duopoly. So we have on the Democratic side, we have the incumbent President Joe Biden. We have Marianne Williams, and we have RFK Jr. as of now. Even though I'm hearing things about him that he might go to a third party, by the way.
Well, isn't it Marianne Williamson?
Williamson, yes.
Here's a scary thought, though. Where did I see it? What if Donald Trump ran and selected RFK Jr. as his running mate? I'm
not sure that RFK Jr. would do that.
Well,
Like if you just want to hypothetically,
I doubt that he would, but where did I see that? Was it a National Review? It was somewhere. And it said if it was like, why not Trump/Kennedy? And I'm like, oh my God. I can't really get enthused about RFK Jr. I know a lot of people are, and David Stockman seems to be, and yes, he challenges things, but there's a lot of baggage there that the reason Artifact, there was just he was interviewed. RFK Jr. was interviewed by Nick Gillespie and Zach Weissmuller, I think, and it's on reason.com. You go to podcasts and go to the Reason podcast with Nick Gillespie, and it's scroll down and it's there. But then a woman with Reason by the name of Liz Wolfe put out a video that really takes RFK Jr. to task for some positions he's taken, and I don't see the libertarian case for supporting RFK Jr. I just don't see it.
But there's talk about it, isn't there?
What to talk about? What him? There's no talk about him seeking the nomination of the Libertarian Party.
Oh, okay.
I'm not aware of that. No, I'm not aware of that.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. No, I mean, hypothetically, like if Trump and picked RFK Jr., in a hypothetical situation, like what would that look like? Yeah, it would be pretty disastrous because I don't know if they would be able to get anything done at all. But what do you know much about Marianne Williamson? I mean, she was like a self-help person for a while.
Exactly. I was going to say self-help. Beyond that, not really, except she ran 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I don't think she was very successful in the primaries, but I can't begin to tell you about how many votes she got.
I don't know the percentage either, but she kind of made a splash a bit because she brought up reparations. And nobody else was really doing that. And she's still on that. We can talk about that at another time if you'd like. We talked about that plenty of times on the other show. But I don't know a lot about her. She's extremely well-spoken, which I always like a good orator. I'm not gonna lie.
Right.
I mean, obviously, police and policies and moral value come first. I get that. And there was all sorts of things about Barack Obama I didn't like, but man, I love listening to him talk. Another great orator. Where you listen to Trump and it's just like listening to like a 10-year-old. But
you just insulted all the 10-year-olds in the world, dude.
I think I did. But RFK Jr., I just don't like. I know he's got this anti-establishment thing going, and I'm not wholly opposed to that. But I mean, like they're calling him out on anti-vaxxer stuff, and I wouldn't even be wholly opposed to that, even though he specifically said he's not anti-vax. I don't know. It's definitely a huge smear campaign against him right now, and I wonder if the people in this country still just love that last name in politics.
I think there's some of that, sure.
Yeah,
there's definitely a great deal of nostalgia.
Right.
About Robert Kennedy to this day. I mean, to think that it's been now 55 years since he was killed. I mean, that's truly amazing because I remember, I even remember, I was in, I had just finished 5th grade when RFK was assassinated. I remember my mother coming into my bedroom one morning about 7 a.m. and telling me that Robert Kennedy had been shot the night before. And I was completely shocked. But I think that's a big part of it. And if I were to, I have so many books that you can see them behind me. I haven't read all I've read a lot of them, but I haven't read all. I've got plenty to read around here. That's for sure. Anybody who knows me knows that. But I really someday would like to read Evan Thomas's biography of Robert Kennedy. I remember seeing Evan Thomas. I think he's a great writer, and he used to be on a television talk show that ended about 10 years ago called Inside Washington. He wasn't on every. Do you remember Inside Washington?
Yeah,
Charles Hammer, Gordon Peterson was the moderator. It was out of Washington, D.C. Nina Totenberg was on there a lot. Colbert King, who was a columnist with the Washington Post. Anyway, there was a fourth person that they had different people on, but frequently Evan Thomas would come on. I thought he always had sensible things to say. And if I were to read a biography of Bobby Kennedy, it would definitely be that written by Evan Thomas.
That's really interesting. Okay, yeah, very cool. All right, let's flip over to the other side, because that's actually got a lot more momentum and volume. Chris Christie, Ron DeSantis. Who else? Help me out here. Donald Trump.
Nikki Haley.
Isn't there like
Tim Scott from South Carolina as well.
Okay.
There are, I forget it. I want to say, there actually is a guy who's not getting any publicity except with Lawrence Kotlikoff. Steve Laffey is his name. There's some guy named Steve Laffey, Laffey. And if you go to Lawrence Kotlikoff's, he's a Boston University economist who himself ran for president as an independent. I don't know, was it 8 years ago or 2 elections ago, 2012 maybe? Something like that. I think it was 2012 or 2016. But anyway, I've heard this Steve Laffey, who was a mayor of Cranston, Rhode Island. Nobody's covering this guy, but technically he's running for president. There are probably a whole bunch of people. I mean, there's something like 27 people who filed at the federal election.
27. Okay, last time I heard was 15.
No, I was saying Libertarian. I said
Libertarian.
That there are 27 who have filed with the Federal Election Commission to seek the Libertarian. Now, only maybe 3 or 4 of them are truly serious, quote unquote.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
But the Steve Laffey guy makes a lot of sense. And I'm very impressed with him on these Lawrence Kotlikoff podcasts. And I commend it to the viewers. If you want to, if you want to hear something different from somebody who's not getting any publicity, he'd be the guy.
All right, let me post a comment in the comment section. What's his name?
Steve Laffey, I think. Laffey. But he has been interviewed by Lawrence Kotlikoff, Kotlikoff. He does podcasts. He's had Steve Laffey on some of his podcasts. Kotlikoff, Kotlikoff.
So there's the names in the comment section if you want to look up these people.
So anyway, but in short, we're running out of time here. But
yeah, we are.
I there's other than Steve Laffey, and I'm going to vote Libertarian. But everybody else, I'm not particularly attracted to, except I do like it when Chris Christie gives it to Donald Trump. That is a fun little situation, isn't it? That is great. I think that's fabulous.
Yeah, he definitely has no holds barred there, and it's a testament to the inner workings of presidential candidates before the actual election, because they just go after each other. I haven't seen that as much or at all with Marianne Williamson and Robert Kennedy Jr. They go after Biden a lot, and rightfully so. But I haven't seen them attack each other yet. Not yet. Not that I've seen every interview or anything like that. But there it is. The Republican Party is just volatile right now.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Ron DeSantis and Trump has a feud going and everything like that. What do you think about DeSantis? I mean, just generally.
He's just a culture warrior. I mean, he's made. Look, I mean, I think that I think that he did well during COVID in Florida. I think that there are some policies people like him. I mean, he barely squeaked through in 2018 to win, but he won by a lot of votes in 2022. So people must. But there's just too much culture war going on there. He just wants to project strength. We need something. We need some good policies. We need thoughtfulness, and he just wants to fight the culture war, near as I can tell.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way of saying it. He's a culture warrior. He wants his culture to win, above everybody else's. Yeah. He wants to make all of America like Florida in politics, and that's not even close to okay. I'm not personally worried about Donald Trump because I think he'll be in an orange jumpsuit by then or shortly thereafter, especially with the upcoming indictments as well. He's screwed, and probably rightly so. DeSantis, I don't know. I find him more of a threat than Trump for sure. I don't know about Christie. I don't know. Like I like his demeanor and I like his persona. I don't know much about his policies. I'm still wondering about that bridge scandal over there when he was the governor.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if he actually shut down the bridge out of spite or funness or whatever. If that was all just.
I don't know that he was directly involved, but certainly subordinates of his were.
Okay. Well, yeah. Oh, yeah. But on that note, I guess that's it. It's been an hour. We're gonna have to pick this up again at another time. All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in to Perspectives, third-party political talk show with Bil Redpath of the Libertarian Party and David Rych of the Green Party. And we're going to keep this going. And next week, by next week, we're going to pick some new topics to discuss. And just I hope you really caught on to the whole ballot access thing, because I really think that's a huge part of the obstacle is that very issue. Is that if we could get third-party candidates on the ballots more readily, more easily, I think you would see a lot of them get elected, like a lot. People are sick of the duopoly, but the duopoly is a stranglehold on the voting process, period. And they're not going to people don't give up power. They just don't. They have to have it taken from them. Sorry. That's how it goes. So, all right. Till next time. Bill, thank you so much, sir.
So long, David.
Take care.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening, watching.
Yes, Heartland News.